Grandad Sam. Yeah. I'm doing a little test film for a project, and I would like to ask you a couple of questions on Monte Casino. Yeah.
Casino. Long way up the
Yeah. I'd like to ask you some...
I never went up that far. It was Indian supper. Really just down below looking up at that. And the tanks were there, and some of the tanks up that side.
In 2013, I filmed an interview of my grandfather, Sam Woods, about his experiences as a truck driver in the Battle of Monte Cassino in 1943 during World War II. A year after filming the interview, in 2014, I edited the interview into a 45-minute short film. Sam sadly never saw the final product as he passed away in the middle of that year. This film will be an interview of my grandfather on my mother's side, whose name is John Moen. As of when this interview was filmed, he is currently suffering from dementia after he had a serious stroke in 2015. One of the side effects of this is that he currently has only one topic of conversation that he would always talk about, which is the Moncrieff and Hood disappearance. On 10th of January 1928, two New Zealand pilots, Lieutenant John Moncrieff and Captain George Hood, vanished while attempting the first trans-Tasman flight from Australia to New Zealand, in their plane known as the Aotearoa, a record which would be broken later that same year by Charles Kingsford Smith in his plane, the Southern Cross. There were many reported sightings of the plane being seen flying over the North Island of New Zealand, with some reports from the Marlborough Sounds area, where locals claimed to see the plane flying over them, or reporting plane noises on the night of the disappearance, some claiming that they saw fire and smoke coming from the nearby mountains. There have been many searches around this area to try and find the plane. One famous claim of the plane supposedly being found was in the 1960s, where two young boys supposedly found the wreckage while hunting pigs in the forest. As of 2018, no wreckage of the plane has been found. If found, this would mean that Lieutenant John Moncrieff and Captain George Hood would have been the first to fly from Australia to New Zealand non-stop. This interview, in a way, is the last surviving footage of John's true self, as his dementia has disabled him from talking about anything else except the missing plane. This film, like Sam Woods, will serve as a time capsule of someone who in many years' time, and like the missing plane, will forever be lost in the sands of time.
On the 10th of January 1928, they were Hood and Moncrieff, or Moncrieff and Hood are better, because Moncrieff was the pilot. They were the first to try and fly the Tasman from Australia to New Zealand on the 10th of January 1928. Now, that cutting is a press cutting.
Hold it up to the camera.
Because I was in the Bank of New Zealand, not at the time, but when I first got interested in Hood and Moncrieff, I worked in the Bank of New Zealand. This was about 30 years ago. And that man, Ken Maben, worked with me. he's dead now, but he got me interested in Hood and Moncrieff because he said when he was about 14 years old, he was on our Power Island. They called in a fishing boat onto our Power Island, and he saw something glinting, a sun glinting in the bush about 10 miles away, and he went back to the boat they were on, the fishing boat, and got a very powerful pair of binoculars, and he trained it on where this glint was, and he said it was an aircraft upside down in the bush. And they worked out it must be Hood and Moncrieff because there's no others missing up there. So it must have been just before the war started, the Second World War. And they didn't do anything. They were going to organise a search but didn't. And then, you know, he didn't do anything after that. And then the next step is he told me about it when I was working with him at the Bank of New Zealand. And that article, the press did that article on us. And I was interested, and I got a photo of an area up there, which is this photo here. And you should have a look at that because this was taken. This photo was taken in 1943. Remember, they tried. Yeah. They tried to come across in 1928. Now, this aerial photo was taken in 1943, and there's an object there. Do you want to train on that?
Yep.
That there's a black circle around it. It looks just like a crashed aeroplane, and you can have a look at it, and you'll see two wings bent forward and the fuselage and the tail.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Yeah, I can.
Right.
It does look like a plane shape there.
Yes, it does. Yep. And the funny thing is, I showed that to your mother, and she was a young woman. I think she was probably still at school. And no, I showed her the photo. I didn't have that circled at that stage, and she said, "What's that?" Before we'd even circled it, and it was from that I worked out that it was the aircraft. So we've got your mother to thank, really. Now after that, I've been in to this area in the Marlborough Sounds 4 or 5 times. I haven't been to the actual spot, but I've been at all other spots near around it. And once when I was up there, it's quite interesting, I was about to take one more step, and I thought, no, don't. And if I'd taken one more step, I would have gone over a 100-foot drop. And that was a cliff. And there's lots of cliffs up there and plateaus, and that's what I think happened to them. They went into a cliff, and then I've got some more photos I'll show you shortly. And I think what they did, they ran into the cliff, and then it fell onto a plateau. So that's the crash site there. I think it is. I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of this is conjecture, but it's reasoned conjecture.
I see.
Now, so I'll put that. Any of this stuff you can get copies of anyway. But that's the press cutting, and now that's 50 years ago. See, I was a young man. I was only about 30. I suppose 40 years ago, I searched, and I didn't search in this place where I think it is. I searched in the Marlborough Sounds area up near Mount Stokes. It's the highest point in the Sounds, but raising 4 children and what have you intervened, and I've been busy, and it's only until recent years, probably the last 10 years, I've got all these photos and things to show people. So, but I'll continue. Shall I continue?
Yeah.
Right. I've got the search and rescue people from Nelson interested, and the leader of the search and rescue in Nelson came down to Christchurch here about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and interviewed me about this, and I showed him the photos, and he said he'll take the search party in to have a look. Now he didn't say when, but I'm expecting them to probably go in this summer. If they don't go in, I've got other people that want to go in, so we'll find it. There are a lot of people who have searched up there, but no one has searched the site that I think it is. It's too remote. There's no roads. I've been into the area, but not right near this. But I've stayed in a batch. It's not there now. They removed it. A batch on Mount Stokes. That I've been up there with a couple of people, and we stayed in the hut. But nobody has searched the actual site because it's too remote, and it's also dangerous. It's cliffs and plateaus. Now, I'll tell you what I think happened. If the plane went into a cliff, and I think it then fell, and that explains why the chap, Ken Maben, said he saw it upside down, because it could have landed in a tree and then fallen. So that explains why it's... I will show you some... These are more recent photos of what I think is it. If you have a look at that, you will see a white object, and I think that's the aircraft.
It does look like a wing.
Well, that looks like the body of the aircraft. All these are trees. Now you've got to remember that this photo is 80 years old. So there's trees growing up all around there, but that's a very distinctive object. And I think it's the thing of the aircraft. Now, your mother's going to get me a better photo than this, and I think if we get a blow up, get an instrument that can analyse this at say 150 magnification, then some of this may show up, because there might be a part underneath. That's the top part of the aircraft, I think, if you'd like to have a look at that.
Yeah. Because I can see there is a distinctive plane shape across here.
Across where?
Like along here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, these are all trees. Now the interesting thing is, these trees, what makes me think this is a plateau that it's fallen onto, is these trees are more or less straight up. Now, it looks like a plateau, but it may not be, of course. It might be in my imagination. But that definitely is not a tree shape. Is it? Well, I don't think it is.
It's not a tree shape.
I don't think it is.
Yeah.
And I've got that photo, and I forgot the smaller part of it is a smaller version of that. That's all. Well, remember, it was 1928, and the organisation wasn't the same. But the other thing is, the top speed of the aircraft was something like between 90 and 100 mile an hour. So they were slower planes in those days, but it was an all metal aircraft. So it wouldn't have been demolished like modern aircraft crashes, because modern aircraft crashes at a much higher speed. It crashed at somewhere between 90 and 100 mile an hour.
So when it crashed, unlike modern planes, how modern planes crash, they would disintegrate into pieces instantly because they're going at faster speeds.
Yeah.
With older style planes, when they crash, the body of the plane would still remain intact.
Yep. Well, that's what I think that is. The one that I think part of that photograph. I think that's the body of the aircraft.
So
now there's another factor in this. The path that they were on, they were due to land at Trentham Racecourse in Wellington, and this crash site is on the direct line of latitude and longitude with Trentham Racecourse. So they were on a direct path to where they intended to land. And lots of people in the Marlborough Sounds heard it. They say they heard an aircraft, but nobody saw it. The only one that says he saw it was this Ken Maben. Saw it crashed in the bush. He was 14 when it happened, when he saw it. It was shortly after the crash, so it must have been, in the early 1930s or 1928 even. I don't know, but I can't interview him. He did. But, well, that's it. Certainly, yes, and you know what I would do if I had the money and the time, and the fact I've had a stroke and a heart attack, and I'm not capable of going into the bush or I'd go in. I've been in there for about 4 times over the years with different people, but I couldn't go in now. I'd be handicapped too, whoever went in. But a lot of search parties have gone in different parts of that area, and also, the Marlborough and what have you, but I have no doubt in my mind that this is the spot. I think we've got too much circumstantial evidence to it, and it takes people. What I want to do now is use a drone. You know what drones are? Yeah. I want to use a drone with a magnetometer on it, because the motor of the aircraft weighed over 500 pounds. Now, that 500 pounds of steel that the motor is would show up on a magnetometer. So if I can get someone to go in to fly a drone in with a magnetometer on it, it's going to pick it up. It's as simple as that, Mike. Well, be world aviation history. Of course, it was the first flight from Australia to New Zealand in 1928.
So way before Charles Kingsford Smith?
10 months before Kingsford Smith. He flew out 10 months later. Yeah. There's the territory. That's where I think it'll hit. I've got the bearings here. I got an aerial photo map from the New Zealand aerial mapping in Auckland. Now they no longer exist, I understand, they're not, but that aerial photo, this is the valley in the Sounds. It's in a Kenepuru.
Yeah.
And I think I've got it marked on there, and you'll see. You have a look at the other photos when we get to them, but the other photos show and there's some interesting objects, and I got some special instrumentation from overseas, that shows some interesting things, and I've got some photos there of, I can't explain them. You have a look at them and see what you think. But the actual site of the crash was in the Marlborough Sounds, and it was, you'll see it just there, and you'll see there are ledges and cliff faces, and I think it was one of these cliff faces that I almost stepped over.
So this cliff face here?
Well, it could be my eyes aren't good, but we're about here, I think it is.
Right.
I think it's marked.
Yeah, I can see the marking there.
Yeah.
But this bit here, that line there with the white spot there.
Where's that one?
There, that looks like something.
Oh, it could be. My eyesight's bad.
Yeah, because in that piece there, it looks like a straight line of trees being cut down, and then there's this white spot there.
Well, these people...
Like, I might be mistaken, but it looks like something odd.
Right.
With that weird white spot there.
Right. Well, these people that produced the aerial photo for me, that's many years ago, they gave me those bearings. Those latitude and longitude bearings of, well, a spot off that map there. And that's the spot I want examined. It was low cloud. It was a cloudy day, and it was low cloud. And the other thing to remember is Moncrieff, who was the pilot, hadn't slept for something like 38 hours, because they flew from Sydney, and the night before they'd been out. So he got in and tried to fly this aircraft. You try and drive a car after 40 hours of non-sleep. It's not funny. And I think you had now the other thing to remember is this. In that area there are violent up and down drafts. I've been up there in the Sounds near that site, and I've seen clouds just that were drifting along and just suddenly shot up hundreds if not thousands of feet into the air, and I think they were caught in a massive downdraft and got sucked onto the mountain.
And with the tiredness of the pilot,
yeah,
the darkness they would see, the pilot must have gotten sleepy at some point.
Yep.
Plane started shaking. Crash.
Correct.
Because isn't it true that there was originally going to be room for both of the pilots, so they may switch places in the seat?
They couldn't.
They couldn't?
No, they couldn't. They tried, before setting out from Sydney, they did an experiment to see if they could change places while they were flying, but they couldn't. So Moncrieff had to fly all the way. And you got to remember, this was, say, a 12 or 14 hour flight. In those days, nowadays it's only 2 or 3 hours, but it was, say, a 12 or 14 hour flight. The top speed was 100 miles an hour. Yeah.
So with George Hood sitting at the back, what effects would it have had on him when he was in the plane? Because would he have been less tired than Moncrieff in the plane?
He would have been a little bit, but he couldn't do anything. See, they couldn't change places. There wasn't room to manoeuvre for them to change places to pilot it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was just an observer, really.
So even if when the plane was crashing, he might have known that, oh shit, we're crashing, and he couldn't do anything.
That's right. That's quite right. There were lots of people up there in the Sounds near the site, heard an aircraft, but because of the low cloud they didn't see it. I've spoken to men who heard it and who went on the original search for it when it happened. They're dead now, but they just, and they're unmistakable, the sound of an aircraft flying overhead, particularly the older ones.
And also, especially if it was flying at 90 to 100 miles per hour.
Correct. And
it would give enough time for the witnesses or people who saw it to hear the sounds of the aircraft.
Yeah, but nobody saw it. They heard it. It was low cloud. Yeah. I'm sorry, I can't give you a lot of information about that, except that they were both in the Hood had lost a leg in the First World War, and both he and Moncrieff were in the Air Force Reserve in New Zealand, but Moncrieff was the actual pilot. He was the brains behind the thing. I think there was a third person. I forget his name, but they had a toss to see who would accompany Moncrieff, and he won. Unfortunately for the third guy, he didn't make it. He didn't. But they left from Sydney, and they did preparations. The plane came out from America. It was an aircraft that they purchased it in America, but the preparations for the flight were all done around Sydney, and they both were experienced pilots. Yeah. The main reason is they couldn't change places. There was no room in the cockpit for them to change while they were flying.
So was George Hood an able flyer, even?
Oh yes, he was a trained pilot, and so was Moncrieff. But they were in, I've got a photo, or I've got access to a photo taken at Wigram, when the existing king was out here, and
so King George V.
I'm sorry, no, it'd be prior to 1938. Prior to them, I can look that up, but they were being interviewed with some other people, and that interview was prior to the flight. Not much before, I don't think, but very close before.
Could you show us the photograph of the airplane beside you and hold it up to the camera? Down there.
Oh yes.
So this is a photo of what the plane looks like, correct?
That's the plane. That was taken in Sydney before they left.
Yep. So in the photograph, that would be the two men getting on the plane, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't know which is which, but that's someone there. But that was just before the flight. Might have been even days or hours. But the registration, that GAUNZ is... Now, this is interesting. That GAUNZ, some years ago, I don't know, 10 years ago, I bought the car number plates of GAUNZ, and I own those. That's them up there. It's registered. The registration, GAUNZ, and that's it there. What else can I say?
Looking at the photograph, it looks like it was taken during the daytime, because I did some reading on the day of the flight, and it said that they took off early in the morning, so
That's right.
between 2 to 5 a.m, so it would have still been dark around that time?
Yeah, well, you see, they've got records of them being heard in New Zealand about 5 p.m, which was 12 hours after. So they there were lots of flights. I've spoken to men that heard it fly overhead. They're not live now, but there used to be a golf course at the foot of the mountain. It's not there now, and the people on that golf course heard it fly overhead. Remember, there was low cloud, but I've been up in that valley and I've been on the Mount Stokes area several times. I've been up there 4 or 5 times, but I have no doubt that that's it, but proving it's another matter, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I ain't going to wait 10 or 20 years. I haven't got that much time, Mikey. But
Like as a message from the future or to the future?
I've got a message for the future, is get the magnetometer and the drone in, because it would pick it up.
Okay.
Simple as that. And I don't think that would be very expensive. You know, using a drone with a magnetometer attached to pick up metal would solve the mystery. And it's worth solving.